Welcome to Hope for the Mind. I'm Kristin, and I want to dive into a topic that is both deeply personal and profoundly hopeful, and that's beauty from ashes, how God redeems our pain. There are moments when everything in our life seems to burn to the ground. Our dreams, our trust, our identity, even our relationships, and we're left staring at the ashes, wondering if anything good can come from what's been lost. So let's talk about those ashes. What's left after the fire? What's left after the heartbreak, after the betrayal, after the trauma, and after the anxiety just won't let up and the fear seems overwhelming. But yet God says in Isaiah 61:3 that He gives us beauty for ashes and the oil of joy for mourning and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. But how do we get there? How do we go from shattered and broken and scorched to something beautiful, to something useful? So today, we're going deep into both the Bible and the brain to explore what it looks like when God rebuilds us from the ruins. When talking about ashes, we have to understand that you don't get ashes without a fire. That means something has to burn, and ashes are what's left when everything else is gone. The shattered pieces after the breakdown, the silence after the betrayal, the emptiness that lingers after the loss. And some of you are standing in those ruins right now. The fire didn't just touch your life, it completely wrecked it. Maybe for you, it was a relationship that ended without closure. Maybe it was a loss or a death of someone or something or even yourself. Maybe it was a season of mental illness that stripped everything you thought you knew about peace. Now, we know from countless psychological studies and neuroscience research that trauma isn't just an emotional experience, it's a psychological one. Trauma alters the brain in profound and lasting ways. Let's start with the amygdala, the part of the brain that acts like an internal alarm system. Under trauma, this alarm gets stuck in the on position. It becomes hypervigilant, constantly scanning the environment for threats, even when none exist. Everyday situations start to feel dangerous, a slammed door, a tone of voice, a sudden touch. To the traumatized brain, they can all signal an emergency. That's why people with trauma often feel jumpy, on edge, or like they're waiting for the next shoe to drop. Then there's the hippocampus, the area that helps process memories and distinguish between the past and the present. In people who've experienced trauma, the hippocampus can actually shrink in size. That means memories may become fragmented or distorted. You might struggle to remember details, or certain triggers can cause you to relive past pain like it's happening right now. The brain's timeline gets fuzzy, and it can feel like you're trapped in a never-ending loop. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational, decision-making part of your brain. In trauma, it gets hijacked by the emotional brain. When the amygdala is screaming danger, the prefrontal cortex can't think clearly. It's why people in trauma may feel overwhelmed, confused, or unable to make decisions. It's not a lack of strength or willpower, it's biology. The brain literally reroutes energy away from logic and reason and towards survival. This is why trauma recovery isn't just about moving on or thinking positively. The brain itself has to rewire. It takes intentional healing through therapy, safety, healthy relationships, God, prayer, faith, fasting, reading your Bible to begin calming the amygdala, restoring the hippocampus, and empowering the prefrontal cortex back online. And yet, Isaiah tells us there's hope. There's transformation, not after the ashes, but from the ashes. Ashes are more than just pain. They're what remains when your old life, your old expectations, your old identity has gone up in smoke. In the Bible, ashes were used during mourning. People sat in them, they wore them, they mixed them with tears. Ashes were public and messy, and some of us have been taught to hide our ashes, to smile through depression, to serve while bleeding, to spiritualize our pain instead of healing it. But the truth, God never asked us to hide the ashes. He asked us to give them to Him. Now, from a psychological lens, the ashes are trauma responses. They're numbness, anxiety, depression, grief. The habits we formed to survive the fire. The walls we built to never feel that again. The shame we carry because part of us still believes the fire was our fault. But let me say this clearly. What happened to you may have left you in ashes, but it did not cancel your worth. The pain you're feeling is valid, and so is your healing. Now, let's talk about the trauma. Ashes don't just live in the heart, they live in the brain. Trauma changes how we process emotion, memory, and trust. As I said, your amygdala begins to stay on a high alert all the time, and your hippocampus struggles to put memories in order. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you reason, gets silenced when your body feels unsafe. So if you feel stuck, reactive, foggy, or broken, it's not because you're weak, it's because your brain is protecting you. But healing is possible. The brain can rewire. That's the miracle of neuroplasticity. Therapies like EMDR, CBT, and other methods work to help us gently retrain the mind and body to feel safe again. You don't have to live in survival mode forever. Now, I want to talk for just a second about what I call the sacred exchange. I want to talk a little bit more about that verse in Isaiah and where it comes from. Isaiah 61 was written to people in exile. These were the Israelites living as captives in Babylon, far from the land that they called home, the place that they were comfortable. And they got there in Babylon around 586 BC when the Babylonian army stormed Jerusalem and the glorious city of David became a war zone. The temple, the very dwelling place of God's presence, was torn stone from stone and set ablaze. Smoke choked the sky as families were ripped apart, homes flattened, and sacred relics pillaged. Children were taken from their parents, men and women were shackled and marched hundreds of miles into captivity. It was a complete unraveling of identity, faith, and nationhood. To the Israelites, it felt like God had turned his face away. Spiritually, culturally, and even emotionally, they were in complete and utter ruins. It was one of the lowest points in Israel's history, and yet this is where God met them, with a promise not just of rescue, but of redemption. The Israelites were a broken people, devastated by loss, devastated by shame and judgment. Their city was in ruins. Their temple was completely destroyed. Their identity as God's chosen people seemed to have gone up in smoke. But right in the middle of that devastation is when God sends them a promise through the prophet Isaiah that he would not only bring them back, but he would rebuild them. This wasn't just about returning to a place. It was about transformation, redemption, renewal. He would rebuild them. And this is where Isaiah speaks those powerful words saying that he, God, would give them beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and a praise for a spirit of heaviness. This promise wasn't to people who had it all together. It was to people who had lost everything. Dignity, direction, identity, people whose grief was public, people who had cried so many tears they no longer had words. Jesus later quotes this very passage in Luke 4 and says, "This is why I came. This is the mission of God, to take what's dead and breathe life into it again." And here's the beauty of it. God doesn't erase your story. He repurposes it. Just like Joseph told his brothers in Genesis 50:20, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." God doesn't just rescue you from the fire. He uses it to refine you. He makes that pain purposeful. And this is the deep work, the sacred exchange. When you hand God your burned out pieces, and in return, he hands you something better than what you lost. Now let's talk about a few more stories from the Bible, because the Bible is filled with stories of God turning ashes into beauty. We see Joseph betrayed, imprisoned, falsely accused by his family, the people that were supposed to love him, the people he was supposed to be able to trust. And in Genesis 15:20, we see, as we said, he stated, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." His brothers meant to hurt him. They meant to get rid of him. But God used that and turned it around to make it something amazing. Something that not only did he reconcile with his brothers, but he was able to save an entire nation. We see Job, who lost everything, his family, his children, his wealth, his health, his cattle, everything that made him him. And he gained grief and depression to the point that he felt just absolute and utter despair. But in God's presence, he was able to be restored. We see Ruth, a widow and outsider. Her resilience and faith led to redemption. And we can see how God transformed her grief, and he turned it into something amazing, and he gave her something amazing, and he gave her a safe person and a safe husband in Boaz. We see with Jesus, he is the ultimate example. The cross was so traumatic, and the resurrection was transformative. His suffering led to the world's salvation. So maybe you're in a season where you feel like everything has been reduced to ashes. Here's how God still works. He works through healing and restoration, healing of the mind, body, and spirit. Practical interventions like therapy, prayer, and community support aid in restoration. God gives us a new purpose. Suffering often gives way to new meaning and a new mission. And Romans 8:28 confirms it when God says, God works all things together for good. God gives us stronger faith and a rewired thinking. Through worship and gratitude and meditation, these spiritual and neurological exercises rebuild resilience. In 2 Corinthians 1:4, it says, God comforts us so we can comfort others. Altruistic healing rewires the brain and softens the heart. So what does healing look like in real life? Think about a time in your life when something painful led to something beautiful. Maybe you didn't see it then, but looking back, you recognize how God was working. If you're still in the middle of your trial, know this is not the end of your story. God is a master at turning broken pieces into something magnificent. And here are 4 steps that blend psychology and faith. Name the ashes. Don't minimize your pain. Call it what it is. Journal your story. Say it out loud in prayer or therapy or both. Sit with the grief. Healing doesn't mean rushing to be okay. Feel the loss, grieve what the fire took. Then invite God into the ashes. Don't wait to be put back together before seeking God. Or I'll talk to God when things get better. Start now. Psalms 34:18 says he is near to the brokenhearted. Pray honestly, even if it's messy or angry. My mother always told me, when you pray sincerely. If you're hurt, if you're broken, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, God understands. And last, look for the shoots. Isaiah 61 speaks of oaks of righteousness, trees that grow where ashes used to be. Healing often begins small, a moment of peace, a shift in perspective, a tiny act of joy. Don't miss the beauty because you expected it to be bigger. And friends, if you're still sitting in the ashes, I want to remind you, you're not forgotten. You're not broken. You are not your trauma. You are not the fire. You are the one God calls restored. You are the one he crowns with beauty. You are the one he clothes with praise. So breathe deep, let the tears come if they need to, and dare to believe that something beautiful might still grow here, because ashes don't mean the story is over. Sometimes they're just the fertile soil for something new. To grant to those who mourn in Zion a crown of beauty instead of ashes. So thank you for being here today. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone else sitting in the ashes. And remember, healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it starts in silence with a whisper of hope. So until next time, take care of your soul, take care of your mind, and take care of yourself.